All right, so hey there, everybody. Andrew King here, Canadian Musician Magazine and NWC Webinars. Very pleased to be bringing you the latest of our free webinar series. This is Sign the Dotted Line, How to Land a Record Deal. And joining us for this are two friends of mine, Brooke Morgan. She's the head of label at Paper Bag Records. And of course, Tyler Tasson. I'll tell you a bit more about each of their companies in a moment, but Tyler's the manager of label services with Olay. Before we jump into the content, just a few things I want to mention. And while I'm doing that, I'm going to launch a poll really quickly here. The idea is just to gauge who our audience is, from which areas of the music industry you come from, just so we can tailor this session and future ones to make sure we're giving you the information you need. To keep going, another cool thing, there's handouts. You'll have a handouts tab on your interface there. And in the handouts, there's going to be like a notepad style of the slideshow that you're going to see shortly. If you want to print that off, take any notes, mark anything down, feel free. The other thing on there is a blog post that a friend of ours, Byron Pascoe, who's an entertainment lawyer with Edwards PC Creative Law in Ottawa. And while Tyler, Brooke, and I are going to talk about the subject, it's a really wide net to cast. So we're kind of doing a bit of a lay of the land. Then Byron's stuff kind of gets into a bit more detail about some of the things you can expect to see at the record. So check that out. Let's see here. Yeah, so I'll close the poll. We've got about half of our audience are performing or recording artists. About a quarter are music industry professionals. That's kind of a catch-all for managers working in any arm of the industry. And then the rest, we've got a few songwriters, a few members of the media, and a few others. So I'll share that with you quickly. You can see that on your screens. Here we are, sign the dotted line, how to learn the record deal. You can't see us, but here are our faces. Yeah, so Brooke, head of label with Paper Bag Records, an indie powerhouse, very reputable boutique independent label based in Toronto. Just a very select few of the artists that they've worked with are in front of you. Some of their current roster: Rural Alberta Advantage, our friends in Born Ruffians, Sam Robert Band, Austra. Just a heap of Juno Polaris nominees. And then on the other side, I thought it'd be cool to have someone from a small indie, but then we've also got Tyler, manager of label services at Olay, which was formerly Anthem Entertainment. There was an acquisition a few months back. And so, yeah, she's overseeing catalogs the likes of Rush, Big Rex, Steven Tyler, again, just to name a select few. And again, I'm Andrew King, Canadian musician. Our intro is getting a bit long here, but yeah, we'll jump into it. So this is kind of funny. I don't usually start the sessions like this, but most of the feedback we get on the sessions we're doing or after they're done has been overwhelmingly positive. But when we were sending out promo for this topic about landing a record deal, someone, we'll just call him Guy, who probably isn't listening right now, but just replied, "Thanks, but these days landing a record deal is only marginally more valuable than finding a good parking spot at the mall." I thought we'd start there, if only just to, Tyler, maybe you can start. Brooke, would love to hear your thoughts, but is there truth to this?
I love this. This makes me laugh. I mean, it honestly, like, I don't think there's truth to this, but I also don't think that there's a one size fits all record deal for anyone, and I don't think everyone needs a record deal at all. So it kind of depends on the person and the band and the music and what you're looking for and what you need, and it's a little more complicated than that, I think. So
Yeah, I totally agree with Tyler. It's like I get what this person's saying that, hey, I can throw everything up myself on iTunes or Spotify or whatever, but it's not quite that simple. There is a reason we have our jobs, so.
yeah.
I'm glad you put it that way because I was going to. We're speaking with two people that make a full-time living in the music business, running a label, and I'm sure that their rosters would, well, have different opinions too. I thought that was kind of funny, and it does seem to be sort of that attitude that's just creeping up with some of the corners of the industry. But
hmm
yeah, I'm glad we touched on that. I appreciate you following me down my little rabbit hole. But yeah, let's jump. And again, we're casting a wide net here. We're going to open up to questions about halfway through in about 20 minutes or so. And at that point, you can submit questions in text. There's a little window there for you. We'll cover anything that's timely or pertinent to something that's been covered. But then don't worry if we don't get to your question there, because at the end we'll open it up for a longer kind of catch-all Q&A. So if you've got questions, fire off at either of those points and we'll make sure to get you taken care of. So this was a quote. I know both of you ladies were at Canadian Music Week this year. One of the panels, this was one of my favorite quotes to come off of it, but it was, labels aren't signing artists, they're signing fan bases. And once again, I think this is one of those things that might be true a lot of the time, but probably not always. Tyler, you nailed it with the one size fits all isn't really there. So yeah, let's start with that. Record deals in 2016. What do they look like? As far as, the last few artists that either of you have added to your roster, what did that deal encompass? How is it different than it might have been, say, 5 years ago? It's a wide net, but yeah, you want to kick us off, Brooke?
Sure. Again, this is a quote where I can totally see what this person's getting at. And I do think in a lot of cases it might seem true because, and I've said this in other panels and people have maybe scoffed at me a little bit, but, we're not signing bands based on a demo that they're sending in. We're looking at a Facebook page or we're looking at Twitter followers, and that's great if you have them. But we've also signed bands at Paperbag, especially within the last year or so, that we are very much developing from the get-go. Like we signed Alana York last year from Halifax, who was putting out her debut album, Dream Magic, and we are very much building her from the beginning, and she is playing all these festivals like CMW and such to gain profile. So there's value to both, and I think at the end of the day we are looking at an artist, but hey, if you already have a fan base, that's nice too.
So Tyler, maybe to jump off from there, but yeah, developing talent, like, is that still a realistic opportunity for someone if they've got the goods as far as, the talent, the raw ambition and everything you need to see? Yeah, is there a chance that you can pick someone up even if they don't necessarily have that kind of coast to coast building recognition that a lot of folks that are landing deals these days seem to have?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Actually, and I think I can brag a little bit here and say our label is one of the forerunners of signing developing deals right now, because I know a lot of the majors won't anymore because it's just kind of not worth their money and time, or they just don't have the resources, I should say. But yeah, the last 3 deals I've signed have all been developing deals, and all 3 of them don't have a huge fan base or like at all. And all of them were because they're so talented, and we all kind of collectively listened and said, yeah, we can do something really cool with this in either country or pop or rock, all 3 of them. And yeah, like one of them is a 360, not all of them are. And the way that deals are crafted now, again, I think because of the way that artists and fan bases work, is that you kind of have that ability to craft your own deal based on what your needs are. There isn't a record deal now, and we take this and we do this, and you have to give us this. It's, okay, do you want distribution only? Do you want distribution with some services? Do you want everything? Do you need us to front a ton of money? Do you need us to help you with your merch? Do you need us to help you with, you know what I mean? So it's almost like walking into a shopping mall in some ways, and getting a bunch of things. If you need a whole outfit, or do you just need a hat? You know what I mean? It's kind of what we do now, and we do develop people for sure if we believe in them, which is great.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, Brooke, same question for you regarding 360 deals. Like that was kind of the buzzword in the industry 5-6 years ago, and I haven't heard as much about it lately. But to what Tyler was saying about kind of catering the deal to make it in the best interest of both parties, is that something that you guys are doing at Paper Bag, considering you guys have a bit more of a specific niche or identity, if I can put it that way?
Sure, yeah. We definitely were doing that for the last few years. We did have a management company and we do have a publishing company. And many of the deals that we signed were for all 3. But we recently actually dissolved our management company to focus back on the label and publishing, just because for us the boundaries of management and label were blurring a bit, and there's positives and negatives to that. It's like,
Mhm.
you know, it's great to have management in-house, but then sometimes you accidentally end up managing bands that you don't have a management deal with, and you sometimes have to set those boundaries, and that's something that we're trying to do again, and we absolutely will go down the road of management, probably again within the next year. But for the time being, it just didn't make sense for us anymore.
And Andrew, if I can jump in really quick too, it's important that like I think everyone saw 360 deals or even just hearing about it as a super, super negative thing.
Right.
And I think people have a skewed vision of what it is because, depending on the company, sometimes it means different things. Like, for example, like Brooke was saying, and at Anthem, 360 was like label management publishing. We have 360 deals at Olay now that are talking more about the release and then touring revenue because we'll actually help fund touring right off the ground and put a significant investment in that. And that's what a 360 deal means to us. So it's important to read the paperwork and the fine print too. And it's not a bad thing. I mean, Anthem was the home of the 360 deal, the original 360 deal way back in the day. And it just means that it's a much more significant investment, but you have to know what you're getting into and what you're signing away or what you're signing up for.
Yeah, and I think one of the major benefits we always saw to 360 deals, or even what we're just doing now with signing label bands to the publishing company, is keeping all the communication very simple. Like, it becomes a one-stop deal for both master and sync when we're doing licensing. And in terms of management, again, it's just like the communication with the band can be so much better than it might be with having a outside manager acting as a middleman. So there's positives and negatives.
Yeah.
Got you. Yeah, so with that, again, we're talking a bit about the flexibility of deals, again, working with the artist and the artist working with the label to come up with a mutually beneficial agreement. So another kind of relic of CMW the last few years has been, the industry landscape changing. The traditional like 12 song LP cycle every 2 years not being as critical. And in fact, some cases, people are finding they're better off dropping singles every few months or shorter releases, basically to kind of keep the name out there, keep music coming, always be top of mind, tip of the tongue. All this to ask, like, is that changing for on both of your sides as far as like what constitutes a release and what you guys will help an artist push?
Did you want
Definitely.
me to? Yeah.
Oh, you go ahead, Tyler.
Okay. Yeah, like with any of my developing deals, I would not encourage them to put out a full length. And just saying that because you do need constant content, of course, and you need to have music ready. And there's no point in advising people, in my opinion, to blow their budget on a full release when they haven't built up a massive fan base yet. Then you put it together, you package it, you get all that money into it, and then you put it out, and then you're working it and you're growing the fan base. But it's you have to move on to the next thing right after that because people are going to consume it and move on. And I think it just makes a lot more sense to break things up into, smaller single releases or EPs of 4 or 5 songs maybe, and just break it up so you constantly have things happening.
Totally. And especially right now with the way things are going with streaming services, like you can get so much life out of a single or an EP because something gets placed in a playlist that's very popular on Spotify, and you can make a whole life out of that part of a campaign as opposed to relying on a full album release.
Right on. I have a few questions that have started to come in, and again, folks, like we're all here for you to make sure that you come away with this with the information that you need. So feel free to fire those as we're talking. If it's something you want more information on, or if it's out of left field, as long as it has to do with music and labels, we're all about it. So here we go. Now, after this slide, or after we talk about this stuff, we're going to open it to questions first. After questions, just so everybody knows, we're going to talk a bit about what labels are looking for from artists. And then the other side of that is how can artists basically get on people like Tyler and Brooke's radar. But before that, we'll let you guys kind of sound off a bit on your side of the coin. Yeah, what are the benefits of jumping in? Or I shouldn't even say jump in, but what are the benefits of teaming up with a label these days? We can just kind of combine all of these talking points because, again, some of them will be relevant to some signings, some won't. But um, yeah, what are your responsibilities to a client or to an artist once they've joined your teams? If you want to start, Tyler, and we'll bounce to Brooke afterwards.
Yeah, sure. Like as a label, I mean, you can totally put stuff up yourself as an artist, and some people do that very successfully. Some people just create their own kind of standalone label to put out their own releases and that kind of thing. I don't think people realize how much work goes in to being a label. And even as an indie label, and myself and Brooke, we'd be going through a major, and we're putting the attention that an indie can give you as an indie onto your project and giving you that day-to-day attention and making calls, writing emails, talking to all the people that we need to talk to for you while simultaneously dealing with a major and getting you on those playlists on Spotify, getting you in those sync opportunities. And it's honestly it kind of in my mind boils down to connections. Like if you're going to be releasing stuff yourself, say you're going to put a single to radio, do you know exactly which radio track you're going to use, and do you know who they're actually releasing around the same time, and do you know what your competition is, and are you able to pick up the phone and call the radio station in Saskatoon and ask them, hey, how come you're not spinning my track? It's like you go to a label because they've developed those connections and can go to bat for you, just like a manager, but they're working for the record. You know what I mean? So you can absolutely do those things yourself, but is someone going to answer the phone call of a cold call of a musician, or are they going to answer the phone call of someone that they've known in the industry for however many years? You know what I mean?
Totally.
Yeah, it's so much about connections, like especially in terms of distribution, I think, because that is something people have widely recognized that they could do themselves. Well, you can, but there's a reason, like, hey, we have a paper bag release on the front page of iTunes this week. It's like, well, that's because we've nurtured those relationships for years, and there's a reason that that happens. It just doesn't happen out of the blue, unfortunately. It's we're able to draw attention to our releases by talking about them with the people that really need to know about them. So that's one thing that you can get from a label that would be very difficult to maintain on your own.
So, as far as assets, then, and as folks know from the first webinar we ever did, I've done some bio writing for certain folks in the past. And sometimes it's the artist who might be signed that is hiring me or someone like me themselves. Sometimes it's on behalf of the label or management company. So even just, I know that this probably differs from case to case, but thinking back to your last few signees, like, do you prefer that an artist have all of their like EPK type assets together? Or is that something that you like to have a hand in to kind of help steer them in the right direction and make sure the brand is rock solid?
I think we like having a little bit of a hand in it. Like, obviously, that's great if you can come to us with things in hand, and you should have those things, but we might want to help you revamp them, especially bios and photos, because I think it really takes an outside perspective to see how you should be presenting yourself sometimes. And maybe you're accessing that in other ways, but again, we have years of experience, so
Yeah.
let us give you a bit of that.
Yeah, and I think I've said this in so many of panels and stuff I've talked on. Like, there's nothing I hate more than reading a bio written by someone about themselves. And that's most people, because it's just you can't write a bio about yourself, no matter how good of a writer you are, how prolific of a songwriter you are. You cannot fucking write about yourself. It sounds awful, and people know right away.
Yeah,
Um,
we can always tell.
we can always tell, but hey, if you were ahead of the curve and hired a bio writer, and you're working something at the moment, and then we kind of sign you, and it's already ongoing, and you're using that, that's awesome, and it shows that you have that drive to get that stuff done, and that's even better.
Right on. So what about, I mean, used to read a lot, especially like in those 80s rock books about the label advances. I don't want to, get into specific figures here, keep business to business. But yeah, as far as upfront money for recording, tour support, I guess the question is there still, you know, fair amounts of money being passed from label to artist? Is a lot of that coming from grants these days? I guess it's a pretty general question, but what's the lay of the land
Mhm.
on the, writing, handing over a check side of things?
Yeah. Yeah, I can give you a little insight on our side of things. It's the way that we structure deals most of the time on our side is, we'll front a certain budget, and the budget changes on every project. Like we don't have a set budget just across the board. It depends on the project. But we'll set a recording budget. We don't usually do record advances anymore, but the way it works is that on the back end, everything is split directly with the artist. So it's no like artist getting a piddly little 12% royalty share on sales. All financial stuff that comes in, like any financial gain, is directly split in half with the artist. So we put on our work on one side, they put in their work on the other side, and it no matter who's working harder, either way, both side wins. You know what I mean? Like there's no small advance or big advance, but then they have to work it off, and then they end up in bankruptcy at the end. It doesn't work like that anymore. It doesn't work for anyone to do that anymore on our side. So it's more about setting a realistic recording budget, but working with the best people possible. On publishing, there's usually an advance, but that's a whole nother story. But on the record side, yeah, it's more about setting an actual budget that can be, recouped quickly, or at least eventually. And then if there's syncs and there's that kind of stuff coming in, and that actually generates revenue, then yeah, the artist gets like half. They get exactly their half, even if they sat back, made the music, and then did nothing. If there's income, they're going to get half of it.
Yeah, and we're doing the exact same thing. We're, I think, always, I can't think of any deals where we haven't done a 50-50 split. But we are doing advances, but more, it's really more of a licensing fee. But the way that we're approaching it with most of our artists now is more in the way of like, listen, what do you actually need? And trying to get them not to overdo it just for the sake of having like a $20,000 advance, because that doesn't benefit anyone.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, you're just going to end up in debt and never actually see the profits of what we're doing here. And you'd be better to be realistic about what you need and then hopefully see the fruits of it all come out. So,
Yeah, because realistically, you're just taking it from yourself, so there's not really a point of it.
yeah.
And yeah, I think we've done that. Like my last deal I just did was the same thing. Like one of our artists needed money, so we basically just bumped the recording budget and built them in a higher producer fee. You know what I mean? Like there's ways to work around, and
Hmm.
that's the benefit of an indie, is that we actually give a shit.
Yes.
I guess that's as good a time as any to plug. Tyler, speaking on behalf of Olay, their website, majorlyindie.com. Go there for more information. And then paperbagrecords.com to check out Brooke's business and some of the fine bands that she represents. So here we go. Again, would love for people to pour in with the questions. I've said it already, but this is a very broad topic. And yeah, we can kind of just pick which alleys we want to go down. But guys, to start us off here, our friend Ed, who's joined us for a few of these, is wondering, are you open to working with young artists like sub 15? Is that something that either of you have experience with in the past?
Oh, I haven't done that. I wouldn't be opposed to it. I imagine it would be complicated, but I think it would be interesting.
Yeah, like
Uh,
yeah,
yeah.
it's a weird world. I did it once. It was very strange. Yeah, open to it, of course. It's just it's everyone's trying to be the next Justin Bieber. You know what I mean? So
Or
there's a lot
Lord.
of them. Or Lord. So there's a ton of the problem with that I've always found, and that was my problem working with it the one time I did, was you always get the momagers and the dadagers because you have to involve them because they're under 18, right? So it's very difficult.
Here's another one, and I guess I can kind of jump in before handing it over to you guys. But the question is whether a label can facilitate deals for songwriters. This person works with a client that's a songwriter, looking to basically shop the catalog around to other artists and entertainers. What we're talking about here is more publishing. But that
Yeah.
said, do you guys have clients on the label side where you would also facilitate these kinds of opportunities for them?
I mean, that happens for us, but more again through the publishing. It's like anyone that we talk to on the label that has either a strong interest or background in songwriting, we encourage them to get involved with our publishing company because that's where we can really find the benefits for them and hook them up with specific writing opportunities, whether it's write to task or co-writing or what have you.
Yeah, we're the same way. Like we have some label clients who are also publishing clients, like in the regard that we actually have them on as songwriters, and we hook them up to try to get them, cuts on stuff on the side. And some of them you'd never know that they wrote, pop music or country music because they're a rock band. But yeah, wherever we can help, absolutely. We do a lot of that actually.
Hmm. So loving, we just had a bunch of questions kind of pour in the last 30 seconds, which is fantastic. Remember that we'll have a longer Q&A at the end here. So I guess we can continue on here. There's a really interesting one here for you, Tyler, that we could save. But one more, before we move on, there's a gentleman wondering about, I get the feeling that he's a jazz composer, and I'm going to kind of change his question a little bit. But as far as genre, I mean, you both work for labels with fairly eclectic catalogs. I mean, are there any genres that you won't touch as a rule? Or, as far as curating, are you open to listen to anything? Brooke, what do you think?
Yeah, absolutely. And even just within the office this year, we've set a few goals for ourselves in terms of like, hey, we have never really done this, and it might be interesting if we can find it, say, in the next year or so. But again, like we're kind of a weird label in that, we have everyone from Tim Hecker, who makes electronic experimental music on the one side, and then we've got like Cuff the Duke making very indie alternative folk music on the other side. So we do a little bit of everything, so it just kind of seems right to not turn anyone down.
Both phenomenal artists, by the way.
Yeah, thanks.
Okay, well then, there's a bunch more here. Remember, folks, we'll get to that shortly. But here we go. We've talked about kind of a few basics on the label side of things, but the rest kind of pertains more to the artists. So, and actually a lot of the questions that came in were about this. So hopefully we can answer a few of those here. But again, it varies from case to case. Tyler, you were mentioning your 3 development deals, with folks who may not have a big profile in their own city, let alone nationally. But with that, for the more typical, like bigger signing that's not a development deal, what kinds of things are you looking for? Why don't we start with the first check here? Like, Tyler, is it important that an artist have a certain level of success or notoriety?
It's more important to me to see that it's growing. You know what I mean? It wasn't like they have 500 Facebook fans that they could have got across the board, like across all 5 band members, for example, getting all their friends to join. It's like that there's actually some steady growth, and that they maybe played a 50 cap room and then they're at a 100 cap room when they come to the city a couple times later. You know what I mean? It's kind of just seeing that the interest level is growing and that people are listening and turning on, and there is a little bit of a fan base. You know what I mean?
Yeah, Brooke, did you have
Yeah,
anything to add to that? And I guess having traction in different markets, it kind of rides on the back of that. But what do you
Yeah, I
think?
know it. And also with the traction in different markets, like if something's catching on in one place and like you can see things growing and people are like, oh, this is really cool. Like it's not hard to help spread that. You know what I mean? Like it'll naturally kind of do that because it's the internet exists. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
So it'll start growing everywhere else anyways. But it's just seeing that steady growth, and I like to get on the back end of people's insights on their Facebook and stuff like that if I can, if I'm looking at a deal.
yeah, I would say the same thing is generally we're looking at people. I mean, next to level of success, it's even just willingness to work.
Hmm.
because I think they go hand in hand. It's like, okay, maybe you haven't seen a ton of growth yet, but you're willing to tour as hard as you can. You're willing to, just keep writing constantly. It's seeing bands that are just in it now because I think it's easy for bands these days because there are so many to just sit back and be like, oh, I'll wait a year and then maybe I'll put another album out. And it's like, oh, well, someone else will replace you in the meantime. So we
Yeah.
really want to we really want to see that you're willing to work as hard as we want to work on your releases.
Yeah, because you wouldn't hear us be like, you know what? I know your record's out, but like I really want to go on vacation and not work your record. So can you
Exactly.
just do it for us, please? Because I actually had at CMW, I had someone come up to me and I listened to their music because they put me on the spot and made me uncomfortable. And it actually was pretty good. But then the next thing out of their mouth was, yeah, we're looking for a label or a manager because I just don't want to do this anymore. It's too much work. I'm like, okay,
Ooh,
yeah, you're literally never gonna get signed.
yeah,
Why would you
best
tell
of
me
luck.
this? Yeah.
Hey. I guess we touched on dedication and ambition with that then. So what about marketability? To put a bit of an anecdote here, like Cole, I was just listening to like a pop hits of 2015 playlist, and amidst the Ellie Gouldings and Justin Bieber's was Two Heads by Coleman Hell. And I mean, what's interesting there is, the song is pop. It's competing alongside all those artists, but I mean, Coleman, leather jacket, scruffy beard, uh, doesn't look the pop star part, if we can put it that way. I just use him as an example, but yeah, how important is it that when you see not just the way somebody looks, but the way they present themselves, both in person and online, that it kind of sync up, like basically brand identity? Is that an important factor?
I think that it is, and I think it can only help you to have one. I don't think it's uh, the end all and be all. I mean, you can look at Ed Sheeran, like he doesn't look how he sounds necessarily, but he's been incredibly popular. But on the flip side, like I think it's really great for a band to have not necessarily like doesn't have to be an incredibly calculated look or brand, as you said, but have something, like be cohesive in this personality that you're representing, because that's something that people are really uh, looking to see from artists now, especially with social media. It's like, how can fans latch onto you? Or is it the opposite? Is it they can't quite latch onto you because you're so mysterious and you don't really let yourself out there?
Uh, that,
Yeah, you don't have to be Guar. You know what I mean?
No.
Not everyone has to be Guar. But I mean, even with pop stars, like you're saying with Coleman Hell, it's almost like the new way to market a pop singer is to try to show how anti-pop they are. And
right.
it's like,
Exactly.
you can put pepperoni, you can put Hawaiian, you can do marinara, but in the end, it's still just a pizza. You know what I mean?
Nice. Uh, so yeah, there's so many good questions here that I kind of want to just get to these because they're all over the place, and it's going to be a lot of fun. So I guess this is the last slide, like the last few things I want to talk about on my agenda, and then we'll jump into hear what the people have to say to be grandiose about it. But yeah, I mean, Tyler, you planted the seed here when you were talking about CMW and being approached and kind of uncomfortably pushed to listen to someone's music. So maybe that's one do not do. But yeah, how do people get their foot in the door? I mean, it used to be, I want to. How do I get a manager? Or how do I approach a manager? How do I approach a label? And the answer that I used to hear a lot, like a few years ago, was when you're ready for a label or a manager, they'll come to you. But as we've seen again, that's not always the case. How even just thinking to some recent pitches, what are some successful things that people have done? What are some very annoying slash unsuccessful slash borderline sociopathic ways that people have tried to get in your ears? Tyler, you want to take that one? I guess,
Oh my
well,
God,
you can go first.
it's my life. You know what? Like people will email me stuff and I'll listen to it either way, but what I always tell people too is like, is this the best demo you can do? Like, would you put this song on the radio and be like, that sounds like it's just as ready and done and great as every other song on the radio? You know what I mean? Like, I've gotten people send me demos that they've obviously just recorded with their phone with them and an acoustic guitar, and like, no, I don't want to hear that. And we have grant programs that will help you make great demos that'll offer you thousands of dollars to do so. And I don't want to just hear a demo and be like, well, where's your bio? Oh, we don't have a bio. It's just my demo because I'm just that great. Well, no, you're not. Like, you need to make sure you kind of go through the checklist of the stuff you need. But I also find that I like when people are kind of persistent, and I like when someone sends me something and I may listen to it and forget to answer you back, and then you come back a month later and be like, hey, now this has happened. Hey, now we're playing these shows. Like, I like to see that name pop up every now and then and be like, I wonder what those guys are doing. And you know what I mean? Even if I wasn't ready to sign them at the moment, or maybe not ever, I may send them to someone else because the music industry is very small, and recommendations are usually how I hear the best stuff. And the last three things I've signed were all recommendations. So and from whoever, like whether it was a booking agent or whether it was a manager or whether it was just someone whose opinion on music I trust, you know what I mean? They just send it and be like, you need to listen to this, it's great, and they're playing this and they've done this, or you know what I mean? They've kind of built up a bit of a story for themselves. And then I'm like, oh, I better listen to this. And if it's great, then it's like, oh, maybe I should have them in and we can have a chat. You know what I mean? Like it's just kind of making that story. I don't want to just get a really shitty phone demo sent to me because then I'll never listen to you again.
Yeah. Yeah, I think what you've really touched on there in every aspect of it, because I agree that like the number one things that we're signing are usually from a recommendation, which is tough because if you aren't in a place where you have people to recommend you, then how are you going to get to us? But that you get there and you get to the place that Tyler's talking about where you can email back and be persistent because you've got X, Y, and Z going on. You need to be so active. And again, it's that willing to work thing that I was talking about before is just, if you are playing CMW and you are coming back for North by Northeast and, you're constantly doing things that are worth telling us about, then A, you do have a reason to email us back, and B, we're more likely to hear about you from someone else if other people are seeing you and liking you, because we're all talking all the time. It's a small industry, and if someone saw you at the Horseshoe, then they might go, hey, paper bag, you should probably talk to this person. So
So Brooke, as far as timeline then, like even again thinking back to the last few folks you've signed, just to narrow it down a bit, but like what is the typical kind of someone's on your radar, you make first contact, how long does it take to kind of feel things out, be back and forth, make sure that it's the right fit for both parties through to, well, signing the dotted line?
It does really depend on the band and where they are in their career, because I mean, sometimes we're signing bands that have been at this for years. But I mean, we're usually pretty quick to want to actually turn something around, or turn a deal around, I should say, not a release around, just because we want, we get excited about things and we want to make sure that we can act quickly on if you've actually been seeing some success, then we can start planning out what we can do with it. Or, just everything takes time right now. Like, we make vinyl, and we all know right now that takes a lot of time, and getting the proper assets in place. So, we don't want to spend 8 months trying to figure out that we want to sign you, or vice versa, that you want to sign with us.
Mm. So I guess if I can kind of editorialize a bit here, like going back to the beginning, we were talking about 360 deals and how, years ago that was such a dirty word, even though a lot of people didn't really know exactly what they encompass. But, and same with the gentleman that wrote the lovely message about the marginal importance of signing with a label these days. Like, all this is saying, over history, when the music business was huge, it kind of seemed like, the labels were the big business, and there were so many stories of artists being taken advantage of. And I mean, they used to really control the industry, control the format, control access, distribution. Whereas in this landscape, if there's anything to take away here, it's that the labels Olay, paper bag included. Uh, they're really only getting on board with things that they like, that they're passionate about, and that where they know that the reward is in both parties. Like it's very hard these days, I think, to uh, have a really one-sided partnership. Not to say that that doesn't happen, but like labels now are very interested in mutual success, and they kind of have to have that output to be successful. I'm just trying to put a nice little Jerry Springer kind of twist on what we've covered so far because I want to dive into people's questions. So anyway, that's enough of me. Can I just randomly fire these at you guys, and maybe I'll just kind of bounce one to the other. But Tyler, I want to start with you. This is a very detailed question, and I read it very quickly, so I hope I don't have to stop and kind of change. But here we go. Considering Olay, in brackets, Anthem has a band like Rush, I've constantly questioned whether we'll ever see a group that isn't quote-unquote puppet stringed. I get it's a business, but there seems to be the short attention span issue, and as Ray Daniels even said, you can't even begin to know a band by a single. Do you see more bands having creative freedom and longevity with an economic aspect that's sustainable in this industry, or are we done with the huge catalogs and longevity of artists like Rush?
I mean, I think a case in point on that one, is I work with another band called Big Wreck, and they've had a lot of longevity, and they make a Ian Thornley makes very sustainable living on publishing side and record side, and that's that kind of burns down to talent. Like if you're and a dedication, you know what I mean? Like there's not a day that goes by that he's not playing or practicing or whatever with music, and it kind of goes back to passion and playing and how dedicated your team is and finding the right team that believes in you as much as you believe in them, and working off each other, because it's like that is a very sustainable career. And if you're a talented songwriter, you can make money on the songwriting side if it's not selling records, and vice versa. There's always a way if you're a dedicated person that wants to keep working at it and make a living off it. You can't expect it to happen overnight at all. And you can't expect to just always be at a certain level in some regards. Like if you have a really big album, you can't be like, well, the next album has to be, otherwise I'm quitting. You know what I mean? You have to kind of get the 360 view of everything you're doing, and kind of have your fingers in a lot of cookie jars in some respects too as a musician, and be willing to work with other artists and that kind of stuff. But as long as you keep your mind open to opportunities in music, you can absolutely create a sustainable career. Maybe not 11 studio albums with 15-minute long songs like Rush, but I mean with Ian we go, here's your budget, have fun. Like we don't go, okay, we need 3 hits and the first one needs to be like a that song, and you know what I mean? We don't do that because we believe in him artistically, and we know he knows what he's doing. So yeah, I think if anything these days you kind of have more artistic freedom, but you sure as hell better bring your best game to the table if you're going to do that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Let's see. That was a pretty long and detailed question. So, Brooke, I'll serve you up a juicy one in a second, but
Okay.
a shorter one for you, Brooke, to field. Has it ever worked, or is it beneficial? I guess the bottom line, would you be open to an artist offering to drop by your actual office to play for you or meet you while they're in the area?
Well, this seems like a dangerous question.
Yeah.
We do have people drop by, more so to drop off demos and talk to us. That's fine. I'm not gonna lie, we're usually uncomfortable. But I mean, we have a piano in the office, so like maybe you give us a call and you arrange to do something like that. Like that would be pretty cool. Like the very Amy Winehouse approach to like actually come in for the label and sing. Like people don't generally do that anymore. We have had an artist do that recently, and it was pretty awesome for us. So I'm not advising it, but if you want to, you can give us
Try.
a call, and maybe we'll let you do it.
Oh, fair enough. I guess that was a little different than what I'd expected to hear, but
Me too.
What did you expect?
good. That as a well, never mind. You brought the truth. That's what we're here to find. Um,
Yeah.
Here we go, Tyler. Just because you'd mentioned the last three signings you had were development deals, what do you look for when in an artist that you want to work with for a development deal? When they're just trying to start building their following.
Wait, can you please first click later on that restarting your
Yeah.
computer thing? It's making me so fucking
Me
nervous.
too.
Oh, what's happening?
Later,
Oh,
your computer's gonna restart.
Later.
whoa. Okay.
Okay, sorry, one more time. Can you repeat the question really
Yeah,
quickly?
totally. Sorry, everyone. That was hidden behind my panel here. I didn't even know it was there. Okay. Yeah, the question was basically for a development deal, what are the raw ingredients that you're looking for in someone to sign them in that capacity?
Yeah, you know what? Most of the ones I've signed, they've just had obviously raw talent, and a lot of times I'll kind of plop them in with some songwriters on our roster to kind of get the ball moving, because just to help them kind of find their sound if they're that fresh. But every single one of them not only has been writing forever and like or making music forever and has that clear dedication to the music, but I think each one of them also kind of had something to brag about. Like they accomplished one thing, whether it was like as little as an article or a review in a magazine, or you know what I mean, something that is attainable by anyone that's good and is working hard.
Hmm.
They all had one little bragging cornerstone, and then like a huge catalog of songs that like could show that no matter what, whether we signed them or not, they were going to be making music for the rest of their lives. You know what I mean? So that was something that they all shared in common. And then each one of them was a different genre, and they're all just uber hard workers, and you can kind of see where it's going already and see the potential in them. So I mean, it's hard to say that there's like a recipe for success in a developing deal, but if it's really fucking good, like it's something that we'll look at for sure.
Right on. Here's a great one for you, Brooke.
All right.
If you see potential in an artist in a different market than the one they live in, i.e., a Toronto-based artist but with a Bay Area sound, would you be willing to take them on and invest in them in a different market first to build them up before bringing them back to Toronto/Canada, where, as recent history has proven, people often love the success story?
We're actually kind of planning that with someone right now. So funny you should ask. So yes, we would do that. I think as much as we may want to think that Toronto is the center of the universe, it's not. So yeah, it totally benefits artists sometimes to try and break them, if you want to use that word, in a different market first because it'll make its way back.
Hmm.
It always comes back.
Exactly.
A quick one for you, Tyler. Yeah, I think if I'm not mistaken, I know what he's referring to. On Paper Bag's site, they clearly say if you want to pitch or submit a demo, here's what we'd like you to do. But for Olay, how would someone go about submitting music/EPK to you?
I don't know how, but people still find my email, so maybe it's just a matter of being crafty and finding it. But no, it's just emailing me.
Yeah, totally.
Like I don't even know. I guess my email is not on the website. I don't know. But actually, our Anthem label site is getting ready to launch in 2 weeks, and that'll have all the info on it. So
Hmm. Okay, let's see. We're going back and forth here. This is a lot of fun. Um,
are there gross questions?
uh, no, nothing gross. There are uh, there are lots of questions, but here's one for you, Brooke. How can a musician who's put out a video, it's gaining traction, a few thousand views, play live very often in small venues? How can they gain popularity or build their online profile slash earn your attention?
Oh, good question. I mean, I think it's very important, obviously, to focus on building your social media numbers. And hey, if you have any kind of budget, invest in Facebook advertising. It's
Yeah.
so helpful. And it can really just get you seen by some of the right people. But you should be using, like, if you're touring a lot and you're using a video to really gain traction, like, put that in front of people. Like, make sure you're using those as your strongest assets when you're emailing me or Tyler or whoever. Be like, here is my success so far, because that's what we need to see in addition to listening to the music. Did I answer the question? I guess, yeah, just building your online profile isn't easy for anyone. But yeah, you just kind of have to be active on it. Like, we also have bands who do not want to be active on social media, and that is no longer an option, because everyone needs to be on there, because that's where people are going. Like, I'm usually not going to a website to check out a band anymore. I'm going to a Facebook page or a Twitter page or one of the above. So
let's see. Actually, why don't you both take this one on? Tyler, if you want to go first. But if someone was interested in working with a label solely for distribution and not on a full deal, A, is that something you're open to? And B, how would they go about pitching it to make it in everyone's best interest?
Yes, yes, it is. That's what the core values of label services are different services at different levels. I guess just, again, like sending me an email. Like, we do that for a lot of people, actually. Because, yeah, not all artists need our marketing team, and not all artists need a radio tracker and publicist and all that kind of stuff. They don't need that help, but they just want to make sure that they're getting, their album and stuff like that in the right hands and in the right networks and in the right distribution chains, and not just lost in like CD Baby or some shit place like that. So yeah, we do that absolutely, and it's just a matter of sending an email.
Okay.
yeah, and we would do the same. We actually really haven't done much of that, but we've offered it in situations where we thought it might make more sense. But just at the end of the day, we've always done kind of the full scale deal. But again, our marketing campaigns are always pretty tailored to the release and or the artist. So like, sometimes, again, it's not making sense to hire radio, so we don't do that for that campaign.
Right. Big thanks to Diane for, I guess, just tagging this on, and it's something that came up in our last webinar with Tim Jones from Pipe and Hat. But Diane's saying that social media numbers are far less important now than social media engagement, which is something you said.
Absolutely.
Yeah, someone last time asked a question. They said that a manager had told them that they'd need to have at least, I think it was 25,000 Facebook likes before they'd even be considered. And Tim kind of chuckled because none of his artists have those numbers. But having a video or a song shared that's got 3 shares and a dozen comments underneath it is just far more, I guess, enticing than throwing something up to your 30,000 followers and getting a few thumbs up on it. So thanks, Diane, for helping us out.
Thank you, Diane.
A great question for both of you here. Maybe not as industry focused, but just curious. People like good stories. But have either of you ever decided to sign an artist by listening to one song only?
No.
Okay.
But I could see where that could be part of the future, just again, because singles are more popular now. So that might be more of a singles label specifically, but
yeah, that's a major label thing, actually, believe it or not.
Exactly.
Interscope is actually, I shouldn't even say that, but yeah, Interscope is signing mostly single deals, and we had an artist. We upstream some of our artists, so some of our developing artists, if it makes sense, we'll actually upstream them to a major in the States, if it's a artist that started in the States. And we had an artist that Interscope offered them a deal, but only because they already had a single that was selling like 150,000 units, and then they just wanted to sign just the one song, and they weren't interested in picking up the next option or the album or anything around it. It was just the song, and that's very typical right now of major labels.
Yeah, we're almost at our hour mark here, so we'll take a couple more questions. But just before that, while we're kind of trailing off, big thanks to everyone for joining us, especially Tyler and Brooke. Everyone at their computer is giving you a round of applause that you cannot hear, but it's been a privilege to speak with you and tap into your collective knowledge. A couple more here. This is a question, a really good question from a friend of mine. I've been told labels will not touch an artist band without a previous release, in bracket releases, under their name, despite you just mentioning that you have signed artists without previous content. How is it that some artists are able to garner record label interest without any content, whereas some artists have released 3 or 4 albums without label affiliation that are then kind of considered attractive? Brooke, you want to take that one?
Yeah, I mean, I specifically referenced signing artists on their first album recently, and I think we're just able to really get behind their first release. And again, we've done both. We've signed bands that are on their fourth or fifth album. Um, but I don't think you don't have to have a release that's out. It's you obviously have to have content that we can hear and get behind. I think
Yeah.
that's maybe what's being misconstrued there.
Yeah,
Um,
like maybe it's a matter of like I get what they're saying. I think like that they we're saying, oh, you got to have a bit of cred behind you and a bit of a fan base, but then some people get signed when they're like just starting out. And I mean, realistically, that comes down to talent and stuff like that. And some bands need to kind of get a couple albums before they find their groove, and some don't. And some people know what they're doing right off the hop, and some don't. I know my first band was terrible always, and then my second band was terrible first record and not so bad second. So it's and some people are just great right out of the gate. I've heard it. You know what I mean? So it's a case by case basis. Usually when I want someone to email me, I want there to be a package behind it. But if I listen to the song either way and I'm like, holy shit, this is unbelievable. We can make this something. We can get the bio. We can get the photos. We can do all that stuff. It is a case by case thing.
um, yeah, maybe not the best folks to feel it, just because, as I mentioned, Brooke, like Paper Bag has their demo policy online, easy to find. But this question does hold water. Like I know that a lot of other, even Canadian indies, it's not as clear. But the question is, why is it so difficult to submit to indie labels? Most of the indie websites I visit mention they don't accept unsolicited material. A bit frustrating that even if in the realm of quote unquote indie, that it's so difficult to submit. Are more indie labels using third party sites to accept music submissions, or is it very much a case of, we go out to find what we want to find when we want to find it? Yeah, thoughts on that, either of you?
I think it's just because we get so much. Like
Yeah, that's exactly it.
yeah, we get probably 20 or more SoundCloud links a day to our email. And we get a couple demos in the mail every day as well. So, we can't, as much as we'd love to listen to everything, it's not possible. So that's why you have to rely on people's recommendations or what you're seeing around you to kind of filter through what you should be listening to.
Oh, right on. And on that note, like just to add for Chris here, but yeah, since so much of it is coming on recommendations, I mean, Tyler mentioned earlier that you want to be crafty to find contact information, which is a good tip. But on the back of that, I mean, just tap your network. And if you don't have a strong network, go to events. We've been talking about CMW. The three of us actually met, or sorry, I met Brooke for the first time in Winnipeg at Manitoba Music's January Music Meeting a few months ago. These are great events where not only are there delegates that are there for you to network with, but the people sitting beside you in the chairs listening to these folks are just as good a contacts to make, and who knows like who can leverage what. So it's not a very direct answer, but where there's a will, there's a way. We've been getting a few more questions here. That said, we've just about hit our time limit. I really value Tyler and Brooke's time, so I'll stick around. I think I can actually field some of these, or if I can't, I will contact the ladies afterwards to get your questions asked. But that brings us to the end here. We already did the questions. A couple of things to tell you, musicbooksplus.com/record deal. There are a few titles that just based on some of the content we've covered here that you might be interested to check out. There's also some tips there to make your webinar experience a success, because we'd love to have you join us next time. And with that, a recording of this will be made available. It takes about 24 hours. So if you registered, you'll see a link that'll take you to a recorded video around this time tomorrow. And then nwcwebinars.com, that's the home base for all of our sessions. You can check out the previous ones we've done. We've mentioned a few of them tonight. I guess on the back of what Brooke and Tyler were saying, check out the How to Write an Effective Artist Bio session, our first one ever, which was very successful, if I may say. That's it. This was Sign the Dotted Line, How to Land a Record Deal. Thank you for joining us. Big thanks to Brooke and Tyler. Again, majorlyindie.com for all things Olay, paperbagrecords.com for all things PBR. We're canadianmusician.com, as well as nwcwebinars.com. We're signing off here. Thanks for joining us.